You still remember the exact moment. Not the day, the moment. The specific second when the math stopped working and you knew, really knew. Not suspected, not feared, but knew with the particular clarity that only arrives when there is nothing left to protect yourself from. That it was gone. All of it. Or enough of it that all of it was just a matter of time. Maybe it was a phone call. Maybe it was a number on a screen. Maybe it was a lawyer's face doing the thing lawyers' faces do when the news is the kind that changes the shape of someone's life. Maybe it was quieter than that. Maybe it was just a Tuesday morning when you sat down with the papers and did the math one more time, hoping the answer would be different, and it was not different, and something in your chest understood before your brain caught up that this was the end of the version of your life you had been living. Everyone who has lost everything remembers that moment, and almost everyone describes it the same way. Not with panic, with stillness, a strange, terrible stillness. Like the world kept moving and you stopped. Like sound went down. Like the room became very specific and very clear in the way rooms only become when something is permanently changing inside them. The panic comes later. First, there is just the stillness. The first thing that happens is identity fracture, because we tell ourselves that we know who we are independent of what we have. We tell ourselves that the money is just a tool, just a number, just a thing we use. We believe this genuinely, right up until the thing is gone. And then we discover, with a speed and totality that is genuinely shocking, how much of our sense of self was built on top of it. The house was not just a house, it was evidence. Evidence that you had made it, that you were the kind of person who could make it. When the house goes, the evidence goes. And without the evidence, the story becomes uncertain. And without the story, you are not entirely sure who is standing in the wreckage. The business was not just a business, it was an extension of your identity, in a way that is embarrassing to admit, but completely true. You were the founder, the owner, the one who built it. Those words did not just describe what you did, they described what you were. When the business closes, those words go with it, and you are left with the person underneath the words. Someone you have not spent much time with recently. Someone considerably less certain than the founder, considerably harder to introduce at a dinner party. This is the crisis underneath the financial crisis. The financial crisis has solutions. Bankruptcy has a process. Debt has a timeline. But the identity crisis that runs underneath it has no process, no timeline, no mechanism. Just you in a room that used to mean something different, trying to figure out who you are when the thing that organized your sense of self is no longer there to organize it. The second thing that happens is the social revelation. You find out who people are, not who they said they were, who they actually are when the dynamic changes, when you are no longer the person with the resources or the connections or the trajectory that made the relationship mutually useful. Some people surprise you in the direction of grace. They show up in ways you did not predict. They call not because there is anything in it for them, but because they remember who you were before the thing you built, and they are interested in that person's survival. You will not forget them, not ever. The people who stayed when there was no reason to stay except that they wanted to, those people get a different kind of loyalty from you for the rest of your life. Others surprise you in the direction of absence. They do not disappear dramatically. They just become gradually less available. The calls space out. The response is slow. And one day, you realize you have not heard from someone you thought was foundational to your life in 3 months, and the silence has a meaning that neither of you will ever say out loud. You were connected by the context. The context changed. The connection followed. This is devastating. And it is also clarifying, because you now know something that could not have been known any other way. Who was there for you, and who was there for the version of you that was useful to them? That knowledge is painful, but it is real. The third thing that happens is the rumination, the going back over it, the if only and the I should have, and the why did I not see it coming. The mind returns to the decision, the moment, the choice that now looks obviously wrong from where you are standing, and it replays it over and over, not because the replay changes anything, but because the mind is trying to find the moment of control, the place where you had agency. Because if you had agency, then at least it was comprehensible. At least there is a logic. At least the world is a place where better decisions produce better outcomes next time. Sometimes there is a real lesson in the wreckage, a decision that was genuinely wrong, a risk that was genuinely miscalculated. Finding that lesson is worth the excavation, worth the painful honesty. But sometimes the lesson is smaller than the loss. Sometimes what happened was partly your fault, and partly the market, and partly timing, and partly just the mathematics of risk catching up with you. And learning to hold that complexity, to take responsibility for your part without taking responsibility for the weather, is one of the harder pieces of work that financial ruin requires. The fourth thing that happens is the discovery of the floor. Before you lose everything, the floor is theoretical. You know it exists. You know that people fall to it, but it is abstract, a concept rather than a place. When you actually hit the floor, you discover something that cannot be discovered any other way. You discover that you survived it, that the thing you were most afraid of happened and you are still here, still breathing, still capable of thought and feeling and forward motion. The catastrophe was real. The loss was real. But you are also real, and you are still going. People who have lost everything and rebuilt describe a particular kind of fearlessness that arrives afterward. Not recklessness, but a specific freedom from the tyranny of the worst-case scenario, because the worst-case scenario happened, and what it actually contains is survivable. And survivable changes everything about how you approach what comes next. Rebuilding after total loss is different from building the first time. The first time you are building on hope and the energy of not yet knowing how hard it is. The second time you are building on knowledge. You know how hard it is. You know what can go wrong. You know that the floor exists and what it feels like to stand on it. And you build anyway. Not from innocence, from decision. That is a different kind of strength. Quieter, less dramatic, but more durable, because it has already been tested by the thing that tests everything. Here is what losing everything actually reveals. The answer to the question you have been carrying your whole life without knowing you were carrying it. The question of who you are when everything external is removed. When the title is gone and the property is gone and the account is empty, and there is nothing left to hide behind, and nothing left to point to, and nothing left to be except the person standing in the middle of the wreckage. That person is who you actually are. Smaller than the story that was built around them. More uncertain than the confidence that was performed on their behalf. More human than the achievement suggested, but still there, still intact, still capable. And that, it turns out, is the only thing that was ever really yours to begin with.